What's up, everybody? Today we are going to use the Interactive Brokers API to get options chains data right off of the exchange. And to make it even easier, we're going to use the awesome library called IBSync. IBSync wraps the Interactive Brokers API, and it allows you to do things like asynchronous connections and events, and it just makes the whole process a lot easier. Let's see how it works. All right, so this is my Interactive Brokers Trader Workstation application. Make sure you have yours up and running. You can see here I've got my options chains and my SKUs. This is where I'm spending most of my time these days in trading options on Palantir, but we're going to get into the code. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that we have IBSync installed, obviously, and we can just do an import star. And we want to do a so-called start loop. Because Jupyter Notebook actually is running on an asynchronous loop, we need to make sure that we start a new loop with IBSync. So you only have to call util.startLoop if you're in Jupyter Notebook, and that's where I usually work. So let's connect to Interactive Brokers on my local port. This is my paper trading, my local IP, my paper trading port 7497 on client ID 12, and you can see in just a second there we are connected. And just to prove to you, you can click the data link and you've got client ID 12 connected. Okay, so here's where it gets a little bit fun. So we are going to create a stock contract for NVIDIA. By qualifying the contract, what that does is it sends the contract to Interactive Brokers, and Interactive Brokers basically resolves it. They look it up in their own database and they tell us that it's the correct contract. We're then going to do what's so-called requesting tickers and getting the market price. So when you request tickers from Interactive Brokers, it populates an object full of data about that particular contract. Okay, so we can actually have a look at this if we want. And you can see the resolved contract because we have a contract ID, where it's trading, the symbol, the latest time in UTC, the minimum tick, the bid size, the exchange, the ask size, etc. So when you resolve a ticker and request the ticker, that's what you get. And then of course we have the market price of NVIDIA, which is the last traded price. Okay, so let's get into some options. We are going to use a so-called request function on the eClient class called request sec def opt parameters. It's crazy name, but all it's doing is asking for options data. We give it the symbol, we give it a empty string, we give it the security type, which is a stock, and then we give it the contract ID. And here we're going to create a so-called generator and C4C in chains. If the trading class is NVIDIA, that means it's the actual NVIDIA contract, and if it's on the smart exchange. So that's the smart exchange is Interactive Brokers routing, smart routing technology, and then you can see what we have is this options chain. Okay, so let's get the strikes, and we're going to say strike for strike. So this is a list comprehension. If the strike is a multiple of 5, and if it's between $20 on either side of the stock price. So strike is greater than $20 minus the strike price, and it's less than NVIDIA's price plus $20. Okay, so what we end up with is basically a list of strike prices within a range. If we wanted to change this to $30, we can absolutely do that, and we get just all of the strike prices in multiples of 5 within $30 of either side of the underlying stock price. Okay, well, let's sort these, and you'll see that we have our expirations now. Okay, and we have our writes, calls, and puts. So we're just building essentially the query that we're going to use to ask for those chains. Okay, all right, so now let's request market data for those options, and we're going to create an options contract. This is all inside of a list comprehension. So NVIDIA, expiration, strike, write, smart exchange, and trading class NVIDIA, for write in writes, for expiration and expirations, for strike and strikes. And this is just this compound list comprehension, which gives us a list of all of the unique combinations of contract objects with these calls and puts, expirations, and strikes. Now, we haven't done anything with this. We just created the IBSync option contract object. We haven't actually asked for data yet. We are just simply creating the contract objects. We're going to use the qualify contracts method again, same thing we did before, which goes out and looks for all of those contract specifications inside of the Interactive Brokers database, essentially. And then we are going to ask that we resolve all those tickers. So just like what we did up here with the NVIDIA stock and got all that cool information about the NVIDIA stock, we're going to do the exact same for each of these contracts. So you can see now, instead of this kind of generic object, we actually have this contract ID, which is telling me that these were properly resolved. And we have the underlying symbol, and over here we actually have the option symbol as well. And also for each of those contracts, we have market data about them. Okay, this is the kind of big, huge wall of text, right? But let me just grab, gosh, that's crazy, the first one, oops, and see what we got. So inside this ticker object, we have the contract. So this is the options contract. I know it's a little bit hard to see, sorry about that. But we also have the Greeks. So this is super cool that we have the bid Greeks, we have the ask Greeks, our options price, we have implied volatility, we have delta, gamma, etc. So we have all of this detail about each one of these options contracts, which we now can go do stuff with. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a list of tuples, including the contract month, the strike, the right, the time, the close, and the underlying price for every one of those tickers. Now you can grab any one of these pieces of information if you want gamma, beta, theta, whatever. I'm just grabbing the closing price. But you can see now we have a list of these tuples that seem to be a little bit easier to manage. So the expiration, the strike, the call or put, the current time of the quote, the closing price of the option contract, and the underlying price. Let's then create a data frame with this and create a list of fields. And IB insync gives us this utility called df. And what that does is it converts these heinous IB insync objects into a data frame. So in just one line of code, we've got this pandas data frame with our options contract data right out of Interactive Brokers. So a little bit tricky, but this is about as simple as it gets using Interactive Brokers. Hope you enjoyed. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I release videos like this all the time, and you can follow me on PyQuant News as well. Take care, everybody. See you next time.